Max Homa is one of the best swings in the game of the golf at the minute. It's very simple, very effective, there's not a lot of moving parts, and he's done a great job with his coach Mark Blackburn of really maximising what his swing can do and work around the limitations in his body. So if we look at setup, very neutral, so the grip's neutral, a little bit of tilt in the shoulders just to promote optimal launch angles with the driver, a little bit of foot flare. This foot flare will allow him to rotate properly around those hips. I love that setup position, and then from the down the line view, it's just immaculate, really neutral angles there. I love it. So what I want to note first with Max is this little subtlety what he does with his head. If you look on his takeaway, if we move this back, you'll see, can you see it's very subtle, but he'll just move that head slightly closer to the target and down. What Max is doing here is just positioning his left eye to a position that will allow him to rotate around his spine and also see the ball a little bit more clearly through that left eye as he moves through backswing. It's a very common move you see with guys who are left eye dominant. Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus do a similar sort of move, but it's just to allow that left eye to see the ball better in backswing. So that's a subtlety. It's something to watch for if you see guys who are left eye dominant. So we'll have a look as well, Max's pelvis movement. So as he takes the club away, you'll see a little bit of bump to the right hand side. Can you see how where that line is and how those hips have just bumped? It's a sort of old school move, whereas guys have tried to go more central with the pivot, but it's a very, very powerful move of moving off the ball subtly. It's not a big slide, as some people may say, but it's a subtle bump to the right, which will just help him move into that trail leg and really load at the top of the backswing. So if we look from down the line, you'll see, if I just draw a line here on his butt, he'll start moving as he shifts. Can you see how he's shifting and loading? It's a great way for somebody who, if you early extend on the backswing, just to get a little bit more shift in the pelvis away from the ball, and it'll just help load that right glute a little bit better. So you can see how he's really loaded, look, maybe an inch into that right glute here. Now what you'll notice with Max is if I bring him to a similar sort of position there, how wide that takeaway is. You can see how far that butt end is away from his belly button. Loads of width, arms really nice and straight. And what Max doesn't do is he doesn't have a whole lot of wrist set. You'll see a lot of guys having a little bit more wrist set there with the club, whereas Max is very sort of passive with those hands at takeaway, which again allows him not to have too many moving parts, and also it allows him to keep that club head more outside the hands in takeaway, which is preferred for Max because he does like to hit that little like covered fade, which is so effective for his ball striking. So that's a little subtle move that Max does that could say is a little bit different to most pros, in that they don't shift those hips as much and they have a little bit more wrist set than Max. But it's a great move. Tiger employed it in 2000. It's very similar, and Max is somebody who idolizes Tiger, so it wouldn't surprise me if that's where that's come from. So if we move Max a little bit further into backswing, I'll just put a line there so you can see that shift with the pelvis, and you can see he keeps moving, and then as we get him to sort of halfway back, again, you won't see a lot of wrist set, as you'll see from a lot of guys, but you'll see just a great position there with the hands. They're a little bit more sort of deep than maybe he used to be. So Max used to have his hands more in the center of the chest because he liked to get his hands higher, but that was when he lost his PGA Tour card, went on the Corn Ferry Tour, and what Mark Blackburn discovered is that Max has got quite tight lats, so that makes it very difficult for him to get his hands nice and high at the top of the backswing. So what they did is they got Max a little bit deeper, so it put less strain through his lats, that he just struggled to have the mobility there to get high hands at the top of his swing. So it's something really subtle, but it's helped him utilize what his body can do and then match his swing to his body, something that a lot of guys don't do. They just chase a certain aesthetic. So he's a little bit deeper with his hands there. Like I say, he's not got a whole lot of wrist set. There is some there, but what that does is it allows him in downswing to create more of a stretch through the wrist, because he's not creating loads of angles in the backswing. Now, if I've just put a line again on that hip from where we started, you'll see as he moves to the top, look how loaded he is into that hip there. Now, I've stopped it there because you will see it starts to move back, and all that is he's just recentering in the downswing, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail as we move into the top. So all he's doing is he's moved off the ball, and then he's starting to recenter his pelvis as his hands are moving back still. What that's creating is a whole lot of stretch through that lead shoulder and through the rib cage to create a lot of speed. So if I just look how that hip starts to move. Can you see that? It's starting to move this way, but look, his hands are still moving back as he's moving left with the pelvis. Very difficult move to do, but you'll see most of the top guys who are powerful do this. I liken it to an action of like rubbing your belly while patting your head. It's a very, very difficult move to do, but that's why they seem so effortless with the power. So if you look from down the line and bring him up, like we've talked about, if we just look at static position, those hands are very sort of flat for such a tall guy. He used to be, like I say, up here, but he's worked really hard with his coach Mark Blackburn just to get those arms a little bit more around his body, which just allows him to stay in posture a little bit more. So if we just roll him back, I'll put a line around his butt, you'll see how he moves a lot better into that trail side, where if he had his hands up here, he'd likely move off that posture. So I'm just going to draw that line again there for you to see. Lovely position, and you can see there, look, can you see that move with the hips there? So he's starting his downswing, and you can see how those hips are starting to move down. So they're moving down and rotating as his chest is still, look at his chest, it's still sort of facing away from the target. That's a really powerful, look at that move, look how his knees are moving down into the ground. And what that does is create a load, stretch shortening cycles through the body, through the shoulder, through the wrist. That angle in the wrist, well, can you see there, just starts to increase. Get rid of these lines because it's looking a little bit messy, and that creates a whole lot of power without swinging out of your boots. It just looks effortless with Max. So you can see down, 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 and then you'll see how that right elbow starts to move lower than that left elbow, which then promotes that club to shallow out nicely. See that club head shallowing out. He's getting a little bit, if you look at that trail wrist, you'll start to see how it moves into flexion here. So Mark Blackburn, his coach, has worked with him on shallowing that club out, and his feel is to feel like those left fingernails start to point more and more to the ground in transition. That just helps him, can you see that? It helps him create some movement into flexion with that lead wrist, and you'll see how it just shuts the club face and shallows it out. And then what that allows him to do is get into a lovely delivery position. You'll see this with a lot of guys. Adam Scott is a great example of this, how at sort of lead arm parallel, that right elbow is lower than the left. It's a great way of shallowing the club and maintaining that lag and that angle. You'll see how his body's worked down. He's created that drive in with the right knee, and it just creates loads of power and torque through the body. That means that he doesn't have to put a ton of effort into the golf shot to hit it far. So you see, look, that move down, he's increasing that the sort of angle between the legs and the torso. Just such a powerful move, whereas most amateurs, you'll see that angle actually sort of goes like this in downswing in the early extend. So lovely, lovely position here, really powerful, working down, driving those knees. And if we look from face on, you'll also see how much laterally he moves. It's very sort of down and lateral rather than like a Justin Thomas or Rory, which is much more vertical force. You don't see that with Max. He's more, if we got him on force plates, you'd see much more lateral movement rather than this sort of down and up like you see with guys like Rory or Justin Thomas. So you can see there, look how much he's moved laterally. It's very much an old school movement. Starts to drive that right knee in towards the left, keeping that right arm nice and bent, which helps him maintain that angle in the club head. Love that position, just maintaining that angle, then comes in to the delivery position. That shaft is probably a little bit outside the hands. He likes to hit a fade, so this is a great position for Max. If we wanted to hit more draws, we'd like to see that shaft a little bit more into this position, but Max likes to hit those little covery fades, which allows him, they sort of just start and then just fall off. Just a really controlled ball flight. You see as well, you can see how that toe's a little bit more up to the sky, whereas if he was hitting a draw, we'd see that a little bit more parallel to the back line. But just love that position from Max. Let's bring him down to impact. You'll see at impact a little bit of elbow bend. That chest is nicely rotated. It's not down at the ball. And then his hips have also rotated out. Probably see more from the face on view. Look there, that knee's in towards the left. That belt buckle's pointing out here. So is the chest, and he's getting a nice bit of shaft lean, really covering the ball, and it's why he's such a good ball striker and has such good control of his trajectory. And then on the through swing, we'll see just extends out, really loads of width there. You'll see as well, look how that pelvis starts to move a little bit more up, just using those vertical forces there, and you can see how it jumps a little bit off that left foot. Like I say, it's not as aggressive as somebody as Rory, but it does use the ground really well. There, Max, look at that. Really loads of extension through the ball. You'll start to look how that pelvis starts to elevate as he's just transferring all the energy from the ground through his body to the club. Loads of extension there. You'll see again how we talked about at the start of the video, left eye dominant. Definitely, because look how long he keeps his head down for. You just see that it's so common with guys who are left eye dominant that head just stays down. So it's quite important for anyone who's looking at the swing and they see this position where that head stays down for a long time. Check the eye dominance, because it's just biomechanically you'll just perform better by keeping that head down, just because you can see the ball. And you'll see with Max, he gets that finish nice and around, exiting left on him. Love that position. Really, really sort of solid position of just holding that face off so you can hit those nice little fades. It's just so simple and effective, and he just never sort of looks like he can hit a bad shot. I just love this move, and he's done a great job with his coach Mark Blackburn. Like I said, Mark's a guy who's worked with TPI a lot, and it really does make a difference how your body is suited to certain types of swing. Max is a tall fella, but he had tight lats, so he couldn't get into that Adam Scott Tiger position that you'd see with the hands really high. So it just shows you how important it is to see what your body can do, because that's what Max did, worked with Mark, and he's gone from not having a PGA Tour card to being a top 10 player in the world. Really simple swing, really effective, and something that you can learn a lot from, like I said, in terms of what can your body do and match that to your swing.